Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm the moderator for this session, and then I'll introduce the speakers of this slot. I'm Francesca Bleve, and I represent today the Italian partner of the Train2Validate project, which is Scuola Superiore per Mediatori Linguistici di Pisa. And in this project, I'm member of the dissemination board and of the quality board, and in the rest of my time, during my life, I am an interpreter, I am a translator, and I focused on accessibility since I create subtitling for the deaf and the hard of hearing, and also I do subtitling for from a language to the other. And so, I'm going to present the next two speakers who will show you the training materials we are creating for the certifications we're going to prepare with Train2Validate. The first one is Piero Cavallo. Here, Piero, sorry if I'm reading, but because I'm young, but I'm old style, and I didn't want to forget anything. So Piero is an accessibility expert and a language service provider. He's a researcher for SDI München, and he has collaborated as a trainer for other Erasmus Plus projects like EasyIt, the LTA, Live Text Access Project, and Train2Validate. In his presentation, Piero will be talking about the training materials of Train2Validate from the first stages, so the curricula, to their realization, and he will focus on the need of easy-to-read language to be extended to everyone. And the second speaker is Tatjana Knapp, and Tatjana has been the director and project manager of Zavod Risa. Is that correct, Tatjana?
Oh,
Zavod
yes.
Risa?
Risa is
Risa,
Slovenia.
okay, fine. Which is the Slovenian Center for General, Functional and Cultural Literacy, and she has also collaborated in several projects linked to accessibility and easy to read, such as EasyIt, My Part, and a project for the development of guidelines, methods, materials and tools for easy to read in Slovenia. She is specialized in researching and teaching Easy Slovene, and she will talk about the assessment of the training materials and about what kind of assessment tools are useful. So before leaving the floor to Piero and Tatjana, I'd like to say that we have prepared a couple of interactive questions for the audience today. We will ask in between the presentation and at the end of the presentation using Menti, which is an online platform, so you can live answer to our questions, and I'll explain it to you later because you have to use a code, and the instructions are contained in the folder that everyone got when they arrived here, and you simply have to follow the instruction on the paper and answer the question. So let's just begin with the presentation, and then we'll make the interactive session. Just make sure, sorry Piero, just make sure to be connected to internet, so if your phone connection isn't working that well, we have the Wi-Fi kindly offered by SDI. Seems like I'm advertising. you should hire me, Risa. You have the password on the paper on the table. So let's start. Piero.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. So, as Francesca told, I'm going to present the training materials and the journey that from 2020 we had to create the actual materials that will be used for future validators and facilitators of easy to read. So, the journey started, as I already said, in 2020, in August, and we created a survey for facilitators and validators. This survey was actually open to everyone interested in easy-to-read language, and the survey was divided in 5 sections that you can see on the screen. The first section was about the demographic profile of people answering the survey. The second about the general education and training. The third one about education and training specifically into easy to read. The fourth about current activity, and the last one about the skills that people thought essential for future and prospective validators and facilitators. So we received a lot of answers from people. In particular, we received 337 answers. More in particular, 109 answers were from validators, so people actually already working in the field, and 78 from facilitators of easy to read. We also published a book with the results called the Status of Training Programs for Easy to Read Validators and Facilitators in Europe, which you can read for free on the webpage of Train2Validate. So this brought us to the IO2, Intellectual Output number 2, where we collected the answers from the survey, the other projects from the Erasmus Plus program, and of course the opinion of validators and facilitators. We combined all these, and this brought us to intellectual output number 3. So the creation of the skills cards. We have the validators pathway consisting in 4 units plus 1 optional unit, and it consists of 30 ECTS credits. The same for facilitators. We have 4 units divided in 15 elements and 51 learning outcomes. And how are these training materials? For validators, we're making video training plus the audio of the video, so to have an accessibility product. In addition, the transcription of the video in easy to read, and the fact sheet, which is basically a summary of the video lecture itself. And of course, we have tasks to assess that the validators they have all the information and they achieved the learning outcome. For facilitators, it's quite similar. We have the video with subtitles, the transcript of the video lecture, the PowerPoint presentation, and the tasks. All these training materials are free to use and to modify, and will be uploaded on the Train2Validate project webpage. So, what are the differences between the 2 pathways for validators and facilitators? Of course, there's a visual difference, as you can tell. This, for example, is a piece of video lecture transcript from a video lecture. For facilitators in particular, here the objective was to learn what is communication and how does communication works. While this one that you see here is the same piece of video lecture for validators. So you can see that the language used is easier. That the line spacing is that there is more line spacing, and that it is in easy to read, but the information is actually the same. So now I wanted to show you like the actual piece of video training. First, starting with the video lecture for facilitators. So let's hear it.
communication comes from
Move the mouse.
Yes, now you click the
Yes.
the word communication comes from the word communication comes from the Latin communicare, meaning to share. Generally, it involves the propagation of a message which is first encoded by a sender, for example, into a written text or a speech, and then transmitted using a channel. The message is influenced by different types of noise that can hinder its interpretation. For instance, background music or others talking in the background are communication noises. Now, we want this noise to be as little as possible so that eventually the message can be efficiently decoded by the receiver. The presence of noise partially explains why communication is not always linear and sequential. The Shannon-Weaver model of communication from 1949 illustrates these irregularities through a zigzag line.
So this was the piece of video lecture for facilitators. As you can tell, it's quite theoretical, right? So maybe the facilitator himself or herself has to watch more time to understand the message, to understand the piece of information. Now let's watch the same piece of video lecture with the same information but addressed to prospective validators.
What is communication? Communication is when a person passes information to another one. The person that sends the information is called the sender. The person who receives the information is called the receiver. The information that a person sends can be written, for example, an email. Information can also be spoken, for example, when you talk to someone. Communication is sometimes difficult, and people find it hard to understand the information. These difficulties are called noises. For example, if our handwriting is difficult to read, a person may not understand it.
Okay, now it's time for Menti. So we would like to ask you a question about this first part of presentation. In particular, we wanted to ask you which video of the two was the easier to understand for you. So now I leave the floor to Francesca, which will tell you more about the instruction and how to use Menti to answer the question. Francesca.
Yeah, thank you, Piero. Can you pass me the computer? Yeah. So we didn't think about translating questions in German, but I'm sure our wonderful interpreters can help us now. So I'm going to start the presentation so that you can answer the question. So, first of all, to answer our question, which is, oh, you already did that? So we miss the live presentation? You don't need the explanation? Okay, I don't know. I think that someone already answered. Who answered? Okay, 1, 2, the others? Okay, you just need to grab your phone, open Google, and you go to www.menti.com. You can follow also the instructions on the paper in the folder that we gave you. Yeah, so you see numbers are changing, and the first question, the question is, which video was easier to understand? The first video, which is the first option, and the second video is the second option. So the first video was the training for validators, and the second was for, facilitators. So the first video is the training for facilitators, and the second video is the training for validators. You see, numbers are changing. We have 8% the first video, 92% the second video. How many answers? 16, okay. 17. Second video is increasing, which is the version for validators. Okay, the first video. Do you want to ask why the first video?
Well, no, just saying it's no surprise that the second video is the easier to understand, and that is the point. The point is that not just people with learning difficulties or reading difficulties find easier to understand, easy to read information, but just every one of us can use and enjoy information written in easy to read, right? So that is just my point. And where do we get the information nowadays is basically internet. Where do we shop? Internet. So if internet is easier to understand, then everyone can use it and enjoy the good that internet has to offer to everyone. And that's it from my side. Thank you all for answering the question. Now I will leave the floor to Francesca again, which will introduce Tatjana, which will talk about the assessment of our training materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Piero. So our answers are changing again, 91% the second video and 9% the first video. And I guess our perception changes also according to our cultural background, I guess, and our education. And, you know, it's falling, microphone, okay. And yes, I actually do agree with Piero, because, you know, easy information could be useful also to people who didn't get higher education. Let's think about, you know, our grandparents or people who can afford higher education, and also us, you know, sometimes it's quite difficult to understand. Yeah, so I think that's it with our first question. I'm going to ask you to wait to answer the second question, and I guess that if I don't give you permission, you can't, so I'm in charge this time. You can trick us. So let's get back to our presentation and to assessment with Tatjana. I leave you the floor.
Thank you so much, Francesca and Piero. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I bowing enough?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Of course, why are we producing these training materials? We want them to be useful, usable. We need them to be useful and usable because we need trainings for people who are producing easy to read or easy language texts and other materials and information. And what is basically this assessment that we are trying to do, that we are now moving into this phase that we will be assessing the materials that we kind of produce. This is, we will check if we did those training materials well or not. Are they working for the future validators? Are the materials working for the future facilitators? Now we have to make sure before we give them out to people so they can train with them. In Train2Validate, we check, as I said, the training materials, and will they be okay to use? Who will do this assessment? Who generally does the assessment? Training materials for facilitators can be generally assessed by different assessors, like authors of the texts or the training materials, facilitators themselves, educators, and as for training materials for validators, main assessors here are, of course, the validators. Are the training materials understandable? Are the training materials useful? Of course, we can have other assessors here. Authors of the training materials, which would be us from the partnership, then facilitators also, and educators, and other professionals and people, but main assessors are here the people who the training materials are for. What will we use to get this feedback about our training materials? We will use some tasks, we will do a little tests. These tests can be questions or some sort of other tasks. I will show you this a little bit later. We can use questionnaires. We will have lists of questions and then provide the answers or not. We will also use a special checklist. With the checklist, we will check if we made sure that we followed all the theoretical things that we are supposed to follow. Like, did we use the accessibility checker for our platform? Like, did we use easy language guidelines and so on? Will this be sustainable? And of course, we will also use those online tools like accessibility checkers to see if before going forward with the assessment, before going to the validators, to see if we did everything what's in our power, and then give the assessment over to the validators. With the assessment, it's really important that we ask the right questions. Not, of course, to the people who will be assessing the materials, but also to ourselves. Why do we have the training materials? What do we want to teach the people? Do we want to just gather all the information we have out there and just push it on people? Do we want something else? And what do we want to learn from the assessors? What do we want to find out from them when they will be going through those training materials? We will use Piero's example. You remember the two texts and the two videos about communication. You voted on which video was harder or easier, sorry, which was easier. We will call them text 1 or video 1 for facilitators, or text 2, easy to read version for validators. In this instance, because both texts and both videos are about communication, we could just ask both groups, the facilitators and validators, what is communication? And then just let people know, freely answer this question. This is if we want to test their knowledge, of course. Then again, this is strictly speaking if we want to test the knowledge, if we want to know if people learned something. We could ask facilitators. This is now not in easy to read, but still we try to formulate it kind of people-friendly. We could ask them what is communication, and then ask them to choose the right answers. And then perhaps for facilitators, we could give like 4 possible answers and say, please choose which one do you think was the right one, which one does video speak about, what was written in the text. Here we have different options, and we won't read them out loud because they are not important in this instant. They are a little bit silly in some cases, like for example, what is communication? The answer D is sharing channels for speaking to each other. It doesn't make really a lot of sense, but we could try to trick facilitators, for example, into answering something that was not on there. Then if we move to the questions for the text for validators and the video for validators and give the same question like what is communication? Choose the right answer. Then we would first have to think about how many options do we want to provide. A lot of research shows that people usually, when they struggle, when they experience certain barriers with reading and so on, they tend to choose the first or the last available answer. Perhaps a good idea here would be that we only provide 2 answers and that we made them quite straightforward. For example, we could provide the first answer, communication is people hiding information from each other. Is this the right answer? Or communication is people passing information to one another. This could be like an example of a simple task, how to check the knowledge. But then again, the knowledge is not all we will be looking for. We will be doing a little mock-up exams when we will be testing these training materials, but we will also want to hear about the opinions of people. When, for example, we will ask ourselves, are the materials accessible, or is this Piero's video accessible, is this text accessible, we will ask like different questions, and of course first we will explain if something is accessible, we are able to reach it and use it, because we do not assume that people now, everyone who will be answering our questions just automatically knows what accessibility is and what accessible is, and we will explain that we want to know if you are able to use the training materials, please answer these questions. Did you have problem finding this text in the platform, or and then, for example, what kind of problems did you have with the text, and write your experience down. This could be one example of how to approach this. What do we want to assess? What do we want to learn from the validators in our instance? We want to learn if all the training materials that Piero presented, from videos to audios to checklists or those fact sheets, if they are useful, and we will also check the platform. For our training materials, Google Classroom will be used, and we will be checking if this Google Classroom platforms is basically, we assume it is, that's why we chose it, but now we will be also checking it with the validators, and then we will be very careful to check 3 things. We call these 3 categories. Firstly, I already mentioned this, we will be asking people, are these materials, these things that we want to teach, that you want to learn, are they accessible? We already mentioned that. We will use questionnaire, online tool, tasks for this. Is this usable? Is this something that you can use? Is this useful? This is the probably, okay, all questions are very important, but this is the second of the 2 big questions. Is this useful for us? Is this functional? And the third one, we won't put that much emphasis on this, we won't focus so much on this, but we will still have to check, will the training materials, will this training survive? We will make a checklist and consider if we considered everything that needs to be done, that this will really get into life and that the people will be using it. For example, here we could say, I don't know, it's very well, is it recognizable? Did people remember like our logo and so on? Will they recommend this training to other people? And much, much, much more. And this assessment, this checking, this gathering of the feedback from our validators will be happening in the winter. So if you will come to Ljubljana in June, since we will be the organizers in Slovenia, I kindly invite you already to come. We will then let you know the results. But don't worry, we will still, if we learn some things that we did not well, we will make adjustments, and where we cannot make adjustments, we will make suggestions on how people can make training materials so that they are more accessible and more useful for people. So that would basically be it.
Yes. Now it's time for Menti again. Can I have the computer, please?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. So this time we would like to ask you an open question, because we value your contribution and we would like to know your opinion. We much appreciate it. Now it seems like a recorded message from phone companies, but it's not. We do value contributions also in having new comments and ideas on what we're doing, so that
this
we can.
This is your assessment,
yes,
basically.
Yes. Like we're assessing our assessment.
Yeah.
So we kindly ask you please to write down the first word that comes to your mind when you think of this conference. So you don't need to access again if you're already logged in. I just need to, okay. So can you write it? Can you see on the phone? Mm-hmm. Okay. So Piero can see it, so I assume, okay. So also for German people, interpreters, please rescue me. Write down the first word that comes to your mind when you think of this conference. So if there is any German word, then we'll translate it and we'll do something, hopefully. I guess I'll steal the microphone from Piero.
No.
Yeah, because if there is anyone in the public who wants to comment.
Okay.
And you can, if you have
Yes.
more words, you can also write. I think it's possible to write more words.
Not just one word, so if you have any other suggestions, then I'll come there with my microphone. So, easy to read, okay, inclusion, accessibility, priceless, that's nice. Accessibility for all, inclusion, internet, okay, fine, which is the main topic today. Design for, and then there are German words. So, I'll start with the German word, maybe, but I won't read it for the sake of your ears. Piero, can you read it, this?
Barrierefrei.
Who wrote it?
Barrier-free, basically.
Yeah. Who wrote that word? Please, again.
Barrierefrei.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So, let's start with a comment on this word. Maybe? Yes.
It's accessibility. I just tried a German word in order.
Ah, okay. It's a German word for accessibility. Okay, fine. Then there is great. Who said priceless? Priceless? Yes. Just a comment, short comment. Why do you think that this is priceless?
So it's a hard question. Because I am first time here, and it was nice to me, and this was the first word that. Yes.
This is the first word that came to your mind, okay, on the conference. So, is there any other comment, suggestion, or idea from your side? Does anyone want to say anything on our project, assessment, training? No. Okay. So, that's it. We have come to the end of this slot and the presentation. So thank you so much for listening to us and enjoy the rest of the conference.